So today we're gonna talk. This is yoga, disability, and transformation. Welcome. The topic today, I think, in some ways is really cool. It's a little tricky, so hopefully I can frame it up without getting lost in all the things that are in my head. But I do want to like take a back up for a second and make a distinction. I think part of for this discussion to really go which is about healing and a sense of holism as it relates to disability, um, is to just for sure delineate before we start kind of the difference between a sense of holism, which let's think about this as an experience, as opposed to like a holistic approach or holism that kind of um, identifies kind of an approach to solving problems. So holistic approach might, can be applied to any different form of what you're doing. Like take a PT, you go to a PT with arm soreness and they just focus on your arm and they don't focus on your neck and they don't focus on how you're sitting on your sits bones. And there's like seeing more of the picture is holistic, right? And sometimes a holistic approach can heighten a sense of holism, but let's put that off the side. But I do want to point out that this year, this is the last of four yoga disability and transformations. And I'd like to kind of review always what we did over the course of the year, because I think that what we try to do at Mind Body Solutions is kind of take a holistic view of the experience of disability and try to cover different aspects of it. So if you remember, the first one in the beginning of the year was on the intersectionality of trauma, loss, and disability. And that conversation, I thought, and you can go back and watch any of these. We have them in our library. I think they're useful, right? um, the idea that often we talk about them as if they're interchangeable, but they are different experiences and they do intersect and they do diverge. And always with mind body solutions, we're trying to um, talk about these things in relationship to our experience of body, right? Not just mind, right? Because in general, if you were to oversimplify everything that led me to form mind body solutions and a lot of my work, is that somehow my body got left behind, right? And on a whole bunch of different levels, right? So that's one that that's one of our first ones was that. The next one was kind of exploring invisible disabilities, which again, it's more easy for our culture to relate to overt disability on one level, although we're scared of overt disability. Um, more visual, but that there's a whole bunch of disability that's finally getting more appreciation by our culture that's invisible. That, might be anxiety, might be um, autism, might be all sorts of things. We interviewed different students for that. That was a really good conversation too. And also that even when you live with a overt physical disability, a lot of your experience with disability remains the part of the iceberg that's under the water. People don't see that part of it either. And that there, no matter what, there's what presents to the world or doesn't. And then there's the actual experience of what's lived. And so trying to, one of the things I think that we've been trying over the last few years to widen our arms to all and always to all sorts of disabilities and all levels of disabilities. And that's what that conversation was about. And then the last conversation was about how although people with disability are getting more voice and getting a little bit more visually represented, that sometimes that also can be limiting. So sometimes our culture's conception of disability limits what we can and can't say, how we are and are not heard. right? And again, with both of those, with invisible display, what happens to your sense of your body when your disability isn't seen? When you're not able to identify and fit into the culture the same way, what happens to the overall experience of being a human being that lives with trauma, loss, and disability, right? And then when you get pigeonholed because you live with a disability, or and sometimes it's an advantage, there are all these different parts of the experience. Um, that also has an effect on how it is you carry or live the experience of trauma, loss, and disability in this culture, in your life, in your home, late at night when no one's looking. Like, how do you carry, deal with, manage your experience of disability? So, if you think about the topics we covered this year, an example of trying to get the different threads to get a more holistic picture of the experience of disability. Now, that being said, today I want to ask the question and start off the conversation with, um, and it's a question, it's rhetorical and it's not. Can disability be healed? Because what it does is kind of makes you wonder about how you define each term, right? And then, of course, the question that's kind of that, like some of the social construction, motivations of different definitions of disability is that doesn't even need to be healed. Maybe I'm fine just the way I am, right? Maybe it's the culture that's designed in a way that makes the body that I have to wear the label of disabled, right? And I'm not sure, I am curious about, I think there's power to that perspective. Um, and truth to that perspective. And I don't think it applies everywhere. But I want to ask yourself, does a social construction of disability, um, that it's a social construct, does it make you feel more whole? Right? I guess we're going to get into what is the sensation of wholeness. I think it's right. I think it kind of makes me frustrated. For me personally, it kind of makes me frustrated with the culture, right? Usually when I'm feeling frustrated with stuff, I'm not feeling super whole, WHOLE, right? I'm not feeling uplifted, but at the same time, it's important work to be done. So again, trying to contrast the, the where the sensation of wholeness is. Does anyone think disability can be healed without it being a reversal? Let's throw that out off to the side all the time, right away. Like most of us have life situations that are never going to completely reverse. They might, if you're one of those people, awesome. Um, does anyone want to comment on if it can or should be healed? Is it worth pursuing? Anybody want to weigh in on that? It's a hard question. Don't be afraid. There's one. I see a hand up. Liz. Thank you, Liz.
Yeah, I'll start us off. I think that there can be a healing of a sense of wholeness within the context of disability without the disability being reversed. So a story I like to tell about my own experience is when I've had echocardiograms as an adult, that the valves of my heart opening up and down so quickly always strike me, going around the central heart wall, always strike me as a dancer. And it was like um this spiritual experience of oh, my heart is a dancer, and that's true. That's like true no matter what's happening in my life, and that was true when I had a hole in my heart, in that heart wall, that my heart was still dancing with the hole. And it's true now that that's been repaired. Is the barking coming through a bunch?
It's okay.
Okay. Is that wholeness and that dance quality is there regardless of my physical ability. And that was really healing for me, even though
Yeah.
nothing about my body changed.
So this is like a really important thing that kind of gets us back into um the topic as I kind of want us to keep diving into, which is um so in a way, what I heard, Liz, was that seeing the echocardiogram helped you reframe your body from your what your body's doing from a struggle to something that had more grace in it. So
Yeah, and it took it out of the range, Silly dog, took it out of the range of thought and into the range of experience and
how
felt
did it take it out of the range of thought?
like it wasn't like I saw the image and thought, oh, that looks like a dancer. I saw the image and felt, oh, my heart is a dancer. It just felt true.
Yeah, so you were able then to internalize the sensation through your body, right? But it is an example. I'm curious about the reframing that it did start as a thought that was able to go internalized, right? So, and I and that is an important part. And so obviously I believe in that those types of things profoundly. In waking, I call them healing stories. And when you on one level come to the realization that your body's struggle to do what you want it to do is actually an amazing dance, using your word, of survival, right? It's an amazing attempt to keep things going forward, right? So um that's great. But I mean, so becoming aware of our stories and our the lenses we put over our experience can if you can reframe them and recreate the story, um, it can lead in Liz's case to a more holistic experience of her body that has legs going into the future, right? So that would be potentially a form of healing. Does anyone else? I mean, and we also know that if it were as simple as just being able to tell a different story, that wouldn't have created the experience that Liz had, right? Because we can all say a mantra, and if you don't actually embody the mantra and change your position to receiving from the universe, that it's probably not going to have an effect, right? Right. So, anyone else? What I'm wanting to flesh out in this conversation is at what point does a sense of holism and what point can it move from a psychological reframing or rethinking to a three-dimensional experience, right? Let's get back a little bit to the
Matt,
question. Yeah, there's a hand up.
Danielle has her hand up.
Danielle, you're muted, I think.
Okay, hi. Am I, wait,
There we are. You're good now.
did it? Okay. So, to answer the question, does it even need to be healed? I don't think it does. Um, I put no because I think disability kind of stems from the darkness of comparison, even though society doesn't want to think that way, but because they're like, they can't capitalize on the therapy then.
Right.
And then it's like people think, oh, we can heal you with this therapy, etc. And then instead of accepting and being and seeing where I or you can go without needing to be therapized. I just made up the word.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, that's kind of
Yeah.
where I've gotten with the
So
answer. So
very cool. So yeah, and so Danielle, it seems to me like you are put more stock into the social construction part of the conception of healing and of disability, and and it helps some people make money. It's kind of the darker thing. Bethany, I'm wondering how easy would it be, just to get a quick sense of everyone in the room, how easy would it be for you to throw up uh, a poll question? Can you do this quick?
I think so.
Can disability be healed? Yes or no?
Mhm.
Right? So we can get a sense of where people land and in what numbers. So throw that up quick. So we gotta keep moving here.
Okay, here it's coming.
Okay, can you just punch in on that?
Mhm. So we just have a few more people that can chime in.
I
Okay.
struggle with my answer because I'm kind of 50-50 on this in my idea of thinking, but I
Well,
went with
then in a second, I want you to Judy to weigh in then. But like, let's everyone finish
But we
boning.
do have, yep, we've got everybody. So 61% of the room responded. So the question was, can disability be healed? And 61% responded yes, and 39% responded no.
Okay, so um, who who wants to quickly articulate why it can be healed? Catherine, hand went up first.
Well, because it depends on what healed means. And in my experience, my body is not any better, more healed than it was 6 months ago, but my spirit is healed.
Right. And so when you say spirit, would you, to push you a little farther along, would you say that healing has been psychological? Is your body really the same for one? Be
No,
honest.
my body is much stronger now.
Well, so then maybe something did change. You
Yeah,
just said your
something did
body's
change.
the same, right? Right.
Yeah.
So maybe you just like didn't, but like, would you say that whatever sense, what you mean to say my spirit has healed, um,
Is
um,
healing
is
the
healing?
gerund.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Healing's a process for sure. Um, but and you'd want to say it's something beyond psychological, right?
Yeah,
And now you would say, although your opening sentence wasn't, it does on some level has had effect on your body. Maybe not your condition,
right, right.
right? So that's a really important distinction.
So now that I'm in this assisted living, I am like in a sanctuary and I don't have to deal with a bunch of crap that I had to deal with when I was trying to blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So it gives me more latitude to actually inhabit my life
And
and
that
do physical therapy.
inhabiting more of your life is maybe a form of healing for you,
Yes,
and it goes beyond psychological.
absolutely.
Okay, so now who wants to weigh in as one of the 39% that says that it can't be healed? Erica, is that what you're about to, or do you want to weigh in on something Catherine just said?
I was going to weigh on why it can't be healed.
Okay, good.
I said no because I think that getting like I healed myself by getting disabled. I healed myself from all of the fears, all of those other things that was disabling me. And when I got sick, it was not the paralysis that I needed healed from. It was the misalignments in my body that could be fixed. It needed time. And I got to unwind from all the bullshit of the world, really. So that's what was plaguing me. It was keeping me floored, being afraid to exist in the world, and then having pain was one thing. Falling, having to change my perspective on everything healed me at that moment because I just didn't have a choice. We didn't have a choice to come back.
So you're saying in that explanation, you're saying that it wasn't, when you say disability, then you're talking about this particular condition. I'm trying to get how what you just said argues for the fact that disability can't be healed.
Well,
'Cause-
because I think most of I guess it's my perspective on what disability is. I'm only disabled when I can't figure it out for myself. That's how I feel. So I I can take a few steps in that, but I am my best self when I'm sitting in my wheelchair, when I'm using all of my supports in the best thing. I've never felt as good as I do as when I'm sitting in my wheelchair. So am I already healed? Was I healed at the point of impact? Has this change? What was I, what, like it's my
Yeah.
definition that travels, right?
So like the what's interesting to me is that again, and this is what's so hard about this conversation is that it depends on how we define the terms, right? Because in a way, you're more living more fully when you allow your body to sit in a wheelchair,
Yeah.
as
When
opposed
I'm
to
all
try
the,
to struggle to fit in without the wheelchair. Now, someone might argue that's a profound form of healing, but you wouldn't call that healing. You would, because you're thinking about healing as healing the thing that puts you in the chair, right? Yeah. So that's, I mean, and again, there's no one way to look at all this, right? Does anyone else want to? Oh, there's another hand up, Bill.
Yeah, I'll be real quick. I was able to train a one of the major hospitals on the Indigo ectoskeleton when they bought one, and that allowed me to walk up and down the hallways. And I got into it after the novelty of walking. I looked at the piece of equipment and says, "Why would I want to?" I turned to him and I want a hovercraft as my next. I don't want to step back. I want a hovercraft. I don't want to have to trudge up hills. I want to have a power on my damn chair that pushes. But I don't think healing is a practical word because yes and no, but transformation is yes and yes.
Yeah, no,
I I mean, it could be either or depending on a person's condition, but the impact is always a lasting imprint on the body. And then we learn to find a place of neutrality, which is the huge part for me, is not to get that angry social justice, charge behind me on I am going to frickin' change the whole world. And I'm suing the US government 2 months ago for discrimination. And I think I could win the case. But,
right,
right now, it's not where I'm going to end up my life. Do I
right.
want to put it into falling on a sword that at this point, 70 years old, I don't even, I'm not sure I want to get it all back. I just want to keep living fuller. And this
Yeah.
has opened up the fullness of my ability by the challenges of my life.
Yeah, and then I think that that's an important thing is like the realization you're coming to is that just purely psychological and being able to notice the fact that how it changes your body. And then we're about to go to Leo. But the other thing I wanted to say, if you get a hovercraft, you could definitely solve the snowflake problem in England, right? So that would be awesome for England. All right, Leo.
Well, I'm dealing with complex PTS and also ADHD, and so I mean I'm very hopeful that I can heal myself with a lot of help from the VA and my therapists. Um, but it's more for me learning how to, especially with ADHD, is learning how to create my own schemata or my own system and utilize that system and to help myself instead of what I was doing in the past, which was, being a part of a system outside of myself that really didn't foster any kind of help or healing. Um, I mean, I remember when I was a little kid, um, I acted like I couldn't read so that they would let me go down into a room with a nice little lady who would sit there with me and help me read. I could read, but I just wanted the quiet. And so, I mean, that was back in the 60s. We didn't really have special ed back then, but I created special ed for myself because I needed that. And I had really no idea how disabled I was when I came into when I came into the world, just because of the way the system runs itself and that I'm just so different from the system.
Yeah. And again, where I think that part of what if you were to thread one of the themes between all the comments, it's like there's some level of reframing your own experience. Like I'm thinking about Erica when she's talked about, for me, I'm only disabled for the things I can't figure out how to do myself, right? And how you fit into a system that tends to not actually serve you all the way, like, like you were in school, they didn't have, you had to figure out how to get your own time that was quiet, right? Like how you navigate the landscape as it is, um, and whether and how much you need or you get the right things that you need. One of the hopes of Mind Body Solutions is that we create conversations and an environment where you do feel like you get a little bit of something that you usually don't get somewhere else. But the question is, what then do you do with it? Like how does that help you pivot and do things differently? And like with Catherine's idea, she got in assisted living, so she didn't have to deal with all the other struggles of fitting in, and so she can spend more time on her own body and her own presence and not have to spend all of her time trying to navigate. These are all have a reframing quality to them, I think. Judy, before I move on, you're on both sides. You're trying to not, did you vote in the poll? Got to unmute, I think. Oh, you're unmuted now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, something popped up here. Sign in. Oh, I
Did
don't
you
know.
did you vote?
I did vote.
Which
Yes.
way?
Yes.
Okay. So, but you're on both sides. So what, so
Well,
depending on definitions again?
I I got a big message that says something about you in the middle of my screen. I'm afraid to delete it. It might make me leave the class. So
Just keep talking.
yeah. Um, yeah, I think Catherine touched on a lot of what I'm thinking. Um, I would say there's part of me I know for sure is never gonna be fixed. And there's part of me that was kind I would call broken, and yoga is way changing that, making me more able. And
Would you
then the mental part,
would you
and
call that healing or not?
yeah, for sure.
Hmm.
And also mentally, and I like that part somebody said about how much more able or however they put it when you're in your chair. Man, nothing, just about nothing stops me. My doctor even freaks out about what I do and in a chair. And what was the last thing? Oh, mentally, I would say I heal that way. I've been healed that way mentally. I don't, I almost don't consider myself, even though I can't walk a step, I almost don't consider myself disabled most of the time. Especially since I've gotten so much more flexible and
So
whatnot.
the only reason why you would say why you almost voted the other way is because you're never going to be fixed.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's also a theme I would say that I hear in this conversation is that the acceptance or the acknowledgement or the allowing that the core, like I have the same thing. And this is what started me practicing yoga is that if I was doing yoga because I wanted to directly affect my severed spinal cord, I never would have practiced yoga, right? Um, if if I started practicing yoga, or what got me to keep practicing yoga was to see what happens when I actually inhabit the body I have in the form that I have it. What happens and what transforms, getting using Bill's word, um, what transforms when I actually explore my relationship to the world through the body as it is. And it turns out that change of focus actually does transform the body, right? It doesn't mean you're gonna do all the things you thought you could do, but you can do more than you think. There's always potential sitting on the table that you leave on the table, right? Um,
Well,
so let's circle back a little bit to another question that was kind of the main topic of this. Um, let's go back to like to use the initial frame that Liz put on the conversation about that when she looked at the echocardiogram and she saw it rather than a struggle that was a losing battle, let's say if she didn't say I call it a losing battle, kind of put that kind of lens on it, like a struggle, kind of like how we feel like, every one of us some days feel living with a trauma, loss, and disability is actually a battle, right? There's some days that just are like that, right? But when all of a sudden she went, no, it's not, I'm not struggling against an unwinnable battle. I'm dancing, right? And it moved then from that reframing was able to move through her body and she felt a sense of grace. I'm putting words in her mouth, but a sense of grace and lightness already, although her body quote didn't change, a sense of grace was able to enter her body that allowed her to experience it differently. I think she in her past has been a dancer, so dancer is a particular, I think, important healing story for her. um so I want to talk about that, like about the transformation when we allow that healing doesn't have to be a reversal of the original condition or whatever, right? However you say it, but it could actually be more holistic. It can be broader than that. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's psychological, even though that's why Catherine jumped to the word spirit as a way to not say something is more than psychological. I'm curious about the role that the body plays in a more holistic feeling, a feeling of feeling whole, right? And that's something that we try to foster and facilitate within Mind Body Solutions or at Mind Body Solutions. So can anyone, I mean, does anyone, what I find not holistic in my journey or not a sense of wholeness is when I'm asked, I was asked more by medical professionals early on to just accept that I wasn't gonna walk again. So the energy of acceptance for me in my story, right, ran contrary to the sensation of feeling whole, right? And yet for a lot of you, maybe acceptance has allowed you the freedom to feel more whole. So, in what sense do you people on the call think that acceptance is a precondition of feeling more whole? Did I not frame the question good enough? Is it too abstract?
I agree with that statement.
Okay. Somebody want to speak that has, there's Gail coming in on a vine like Jane, Tarzan's Jane, her own vine swinger.
Yeah, hi everyone. Sorry, my brain is now forgetting what I was going to say.
It happens.
Yes, it does. And I think it had something to do with acceptance. And
Yeah.
can you restate it again?
Yeah. So what I was saying was that I said for me that early on that acceptance actually didn't make me like I was supposed to accept that I just couldn't walk again, and that was like a thing, and that didn't foster for me a sense of feeling more whole in my entire body. However, for a lot of people, acceptance is exactly acceptance. For example, maybe Judy, I'm putting words in her mouth, me, I don't know if this is true, had to accept that she couldn't fix what was going on, and that actually led to a sense of more holistic exploration or a sense of exploring what it is to feel whole. Does that help at all? What you're gonna
It
think
does.
about? Okay, so what was the
I think acceptance is crucial for
Mhm,
healing. And
mhm,
it's the acceptance of what is, but your experience of what your doctors were telling you was different than what maybe your body was telling you.
mhm.
And so it doesn't mean that we have to accept what medical professionals or society or other people say, but like accepting our own truth with the reality of what we're dealing with is arising for me as you were talking about that.
Accepting the reality of your own. It's interesting you call that acceptance. For me, the reality of what my actual experience, and again, this is just me, like everyone's gonna have a different take. For me, being really truthful about what actually is going on in my experience actually isn't a form of acceptance. I have to explore what the hell it even means. Right? Right. So where I might have had to accept that I'm never going to walk again, that's different than being truthful about for me, the experience of paralysis, right? That for me, it meant, wow, wait, what is it that I really do experience here when I'm able to separate it from what I was told about what this situation was, right?
I think
So
it's the difference between the mind trying to figure something out and the body trying to figure something
yeah,
out.
and I didn't pay her to say that. That's part of what I'm hoping, over the years, and we'll start going to some of the hands up. Over the years, I can tell you that for a long time, especially when I was teaching in person, and it's harder to do this on Zoom. One of the things I would keep as one of my quiet North Stars was just trying to get people to actually land in the body that was actually in the room, right? Like not the one with all the do you think good or do you think not good? What should my body be doing? What is it's doing, and it takes, and maybe that does take acceptance, right? I mean, this is where the words get hard. Erica, your hands up.
I was gonna say this help like makes me think of like I divide it into radical acceptance and acceptance. And part of like what I said where I was saying like I healed from before is I'm a recovered addict alcoholic. So I've gone through the process of, but it set me up for what all the skills that I needed to go paralyzed, to have the life fall out. But coming out from something that's a life altering thing, radical acceptance helped me get to those next steps. And I was thinking about and I'm like, damn it, am I changing? But it's an existential question. All these questions in disability have 360 degrees of truth. So um, I think acceptance is the most important thing. Radical acceptance helped me understand where I was in each fleeting moment, what could be held onto, and then what I could grow from, where I needed to step back, where I needed to do all those things. So I think I would be dead if acceptance wasn't the first part of what I had to do.
I think that's a great way of putting what you mean by acceptance, right? And I think that, and in a way, like acceptance on that level is like taking a great big and letting out a great big exhale and letting what's true actually be true.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And is the reason why I switch over to exhale. It's one thing to do that in your mind. It's another thing to allow it to be a body experience too, right? And so again, we're at that junction of what this thing is about is how does it move towards and into including your body? Because especially when you live with a physical disability, it's hard to include your body in the new world,
Yeah.
right? And what I'm hearing is that a version for me, rather than thinking about for me, the story for me that works better for me is that instead of just thinking that as necessarily just acceptance, for me, it's a journey of exploration and wonder into what actually is true, right? Laura, your hands up.
Yeah, it's interesting. I find even like talking about, healing and accepting just really sort of like a sort of a triggering thing for me. I find it very upsetting. I genuinely do. And I think it's because of the narrative that I kind of felt about it when I was young. You know what I mean? And a long time ago, you did a class, or I don't know if it was maybe when I was at MBS, I can't remember, but you talked to us about the difference between accepting and allowing. And it was really helpful to me because it was like I remember you saying you don't have to accept everything that they tell you, because when I got so good when I was young at being like, well, that must be just the way it is, you know what I mean? And I have to do that now. And it kind of cut me off from my feelings about it, because I was like, well, there's no point in even digging into that because I just have to accept it. And so I kind of can find when people talk about healing, it really upsets me. Sorry. Um, yeah, just find it
So,
really.
so I'm really, of course, I want to dig in right there, right? So, which is you don't have to, but like, why do you find the transition from what you just said, which I think was like beautiful, and then when it gets to the word healing, why do you think that makes it bring up grief?
I think because I always thought, well, if I can't get better, does that mean you can't accept me like this?
Ah.
Does that mean nobody will love me like this? Nobody will like me like this if I don't get better, or if I don't heal or something.
So for you, healing as a kid, which makes a lot of sense, healing meant getting better, right? Which is interesting, right? There's a conflation, not just a little kid, I think we all make that
Yeah.
healing means to get better, right? Or
And I
that
was, the narrative I had was that I was never going to do that because I was
because you've been told to
at a
accept
set
that you're
time. So I was like, well, that puts me in an awkward situation now. And so I put a block on myself for a lot of my childhood. Like my mother would mention things like yoga, or she'd mention like, oh, this thing about stem cell, and I would get really angry and be like, do you just not love me like this? Is that what you're trying to say? Like, can you just not live with me like this? And she would be like, no, it's just like it might help you to feel better. And I was like, for who? Like for you or for me? And she'd be like, okay, like, so everyone just sort of stopped talking to me about things like that because I was like, well, I have to accept this is my body. And if you can't accept it, then, no one will. I'll just have to cut something off. And so, yeah, I just always find it very like hard to kind of, I think when I got older, MBS has been a huge help for me because it's like, what would it be like to imagine just landing in this body?
Mhm.
And
Yeah, it's interesting that and I suspect that this has to do with the fact that you were born with spina bifida, right? But I don't know.
mhm,
We're way above my pay grade right now, right? But like in my experience realm, but it seems like one of the things that you just struck me in a way that was beautiful and sad, which was that you must have been wired from the very little when you're like one and a half trying to fit in, trying to make sure that if you didn't fit in, you weren't loved, right? And somehow those two sensations got overlapping, got conflated with each other,
mhm,
right? Because like what you're saying now is that don't tell me I need to heal because that means you probably don't accept me,
yeah,
right? And it's like that kind of acceptance is like, dang, I get it. I
mhm.
just got new insight into Laura.
Oh
Think of
no,
all the ways I could
that
pick at you.
wasn't supposed to happen.
Think of all the ways I get to pick at you now.
Oh Lord.
I know. I mean it with a huge smile on my face.
Don't make it worse. I cried in public.
I
So
know,
don't
but
make
I
it
let
worse.
I kind of want you to ball your eyes out, but I'm gonna let you go. But I do think this is like a big thing, is like especially not, I mean, again, talking about all the different experiences of disability, you know, Laura comes out of the chute and is trying to fit in and keep up, right? Trying to keep up with their peers, trying to this, trying to that, having it all cut up in. So there's an experience line where one of the things of what it is to it, and then to have it also come out in terms of like, well, don't tell me I need to heal and try something else. It's just me and I'm good the way I am. Little girl, trying to struggle with being who she is. And so, dang. So there's a part of me that wants to like, I couldn't physically do this, but like, if Laura was sitting on the floor and she's saying this would be some of the wisdom of if we were in person, but if you can figure out a way to get support like this, as she was saying something this, I'd have like Molly's head or Bethany's head, I'd have her there put their head right into her spine from her back between her shoulder blades. So as she's uttering those words, her spine is getting brought into the world as the words are coming out of her mouth. Because so many of the things when we realize and we accept, there's at first a sense of falling out of the world that comes with that. And then often what I'm trying to do with the work I was trying to do is that I've tried to support the spine right as the mind is realizing stuff. Right. And that's part of what we try to do in Body Mind Story too. We lost somebody's hand. Whose hand was up that just went down?
It was Amanda.
Amanda. Then we'll go after that to Christina, and then we gotta,
Yes, sir.
yes, ma'am.
Yes. Well, Laura put me off a bit. I just thought,
Put you
well,
off like you're mad at her, or did you start
no,
weeping?
no. What Laura said was just, I can relate to it so much. So I was just thinking, because I was going to say there's a difference between when I put my hand up, Erica hadn't spoken, and neither had Laura, because I was going to say you can actually accept something, but it doesn't mean that you're anywhere near the point of starting your healing journey. So I could accept my diagnosis straight away, and I could accept the fact that there was no cure and it was going to progress. Doesn't mean, I'm not saying I liked it, and I'm not saying I thought it was fair, but I could accept it. But there was a long time before the healing, because even though I accepted it, I still tried to beat it. And for me, the healing started when I stopped trying to beat it and make myself be like how I thought I should be. And then I could start to feel the body that I'd got and look after the body I'd got rather than the body I thought I should have.
And you're calm. I mean, this is the slide right there between once you stop trying to beat it, then you switch to the word heal.
Because all the time I was trying to prove, because I like to do this, prove people wrong, that I could regrow the muscles, that I could use the other muscles to overcome it. That's when I was stuck. But once I started thinking, and I used to try and correct, I don't know what word, I was going to say defect, but that's a horrible word. So I still walk. When I could walk, I walked like a duck with my heels together and toes pointing out like little, what they call duck feet. And I would waddle, but I could walk quite quickly like that. And I was quite stable like that. But I spent years trying to walk with my feet going forward and like what a normal person, I'm not choosing my words very well, but what's traditional body.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And that hurt and that caused a lot of pain. And I was very unstable. I fell over all the time. But in my mind, that was the proper way to walk. Since I've decided to listen to the body, because it can do some fab things without me even thinking, and it's recruited muscles to help doing jobs without my interference. And once I've started letting it do that, then I feel that I'm healing more.
Yeah.
But I do think healing's a funny word.
It is a funny word. Yeah. It's got a lot of connotations. I think we should have ironic t-shirts that say correct the defect. Like it almost rhymes. Correct the defect, right? But no one would know that we're being completely ironic. They would think we meant it.
Exactly.
Right? But that's why I love shit like that. Like correct the defect kind of sounds like stop the steal, right? Correct the defect. We get the ECT alliteration in there. All right. So yeah. But I think that this is again what you're talking about is where the conversation where it steps out into more where you gave a great example of trying to walk with your feet straight ahead, but when you actually tried to let your body walk for a while the way it is, doesn't mean that there might be adjustments to that, right? But you actually lived in the body and then figured out in retrospect that that was also some wise stuff, right? So, but that's where it's not just acceptance, it's moved into how you're moving your body. And that's the transition where I think yoga and asana can really help is trying to help the moment between for Liz when she just saw the echocardiogram and then it became dancing, which then migrated to the sense of her whole body. And that sense of the body included in your conception of healing or beyond acceptance, psychological acceptance, is the thing that Mind Body Solutions tries to foster, which then maybe has the effect of you recognizing how to move your body differently too, and how to support the duck feet, as you say, and then figure out ways to work with that. So, Christine Byland.
Yeah, that's me. I'm just going to take my hand down. It's my mind's been wandering now when I've been listening. So maybe I started one place raising my hand
Yeah,
and
but just bring
ended
it
up
back
other
wherever it
places.
comes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. I was really touched by what you were speaking about, Laura. And I think there really is a difference perhaps for I born with cerebral palsy and this notion of this body and or the disabled body being the only body that I know. And so there is no for me, there's no traumatic intervention in that sense that altered my body or so. And rather, the trauma, I would say, is these effects of the wear and tear of living in a marginalized position, and that's also something that I've had a hard time dealing with as an adult. And because I think I'm also in this position now where I'm in my late 30s, and a couple of years ago I had quite a drastic change to my abilities and my body, and a lot of spiking pain levels that I'd never experienced before, and those kinds of things, which when I read up on is quite common, is also known as the cerebral palsy middle age, where if you have put lots of strain on your body, these things will happen. And for me, it was really a tricky time to feel that this mostly muscle tenseness or heightened tonus that I've experienced, that it caused me pain. I felt really betrayed in senses for this physicality that I've kind of defended and I've learned to engage with. And I think for me, being part of the MSB and doing the practices has also has really helped me, I think, to use some techniques that I was taught as a child in terms of exercise and using my body, but not in this kind of punitive or stigmatized setting that a lot of the physical therapies that I did as a kid was. So it's also been about using this, sometimes using the same type of practices in my personal sort of workout schedules, but doing it more with the sense of wholeness, I think. So for me, healing is not, it's also this kind of triggering word, but it's, for me, it's been more, and I think this is, sometimes it's just about what language means in different cultural settings as well. Healing can be various things, but for me, I've been more guided by this sense of wholeness and this notion of returning to the body and treating it, sort of helping it carry me through the world. And I think in that sense, there's lots of grief, not necessarily for traumatic physical events, but just the experience of living in a body that has not been taken care of by society that surrounds me. So lots of these sort of negative consequences of growing older with cerebral palsy can be it can be hindered, or they can be sort of more mild, of course, if we have access to lots of support. So it's also been this existential debate maybe with myself in terms of like, okay, but I need to accept that because I've been living in this kind of time and space where I don't have the accessibility or the supports that I need, I've had these negative consequences. But then to sort of to have that be transformative into taking better care of myself with the things that I can do, or to I don't know, safeguard myself physically in that sense. Yeah. And I think I really enjoy this conversation because it's all these different types of perspectives. And I think it varies as well, given the cultural context. I'm based in Sweden, and I think here
is that where you live? I mean, I was
yeah, that's
where
where I
you
live.
call in. You're calling in
Sorry?
from Sweden?
Yeah.
Awesome.
So,
How long
but I
have you been
think
coming to MBS? I'm being selfish. I want to know how long you've been coming to MBS.
Maybe about a year. I think I because I usually go to the practices with Rodrigo and Angelique. So I think I saw something on Rodrigo's Instagram, maybe, and I know him from knowing other disabled people. So
very cool.
Coming. Yeah.
You should come more and speak more. You say smart things. You say good
Thank
things,
you.
right?
Thank you.
Yeah. You said a lot, and I think they're all They're all right on. And I think that's a part of what's so magical about these conversations, that you actually do get different perspectives, and words like healing are too big and acceptance are too big. And there's a problem always with, because not any one word can capture all the different um diversity of the experiences of living with all different types of situations. So I hope to hear your gums flap again in one of our classes. Christine Hansel.
Hansel, yeah. Hi. Okay, my thoughts keep evolving.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, I've been thinking about the way I separated out my emotional and physical acceptance um, after my injury. It and how it caught up to me. And why I'm doing MBS now, 33 years after my accident. The roughness of the medical system and the practicality of the adjustment, I I think it encouraged me to separate out. I remember going down to physio for the first time in the hospital after my accident and seeing other, broken bodies and just quote unquote, and feeling, crying. And then after that, I just got on with it, and I felt, I moved just for the purpose of my physical adjustment. I kind of left my emotions behind, or my brain. And it's funny because in the hospital they'd say, is she my friends, they'd ask, apparently the nurses asked, is she talking to you? Is she emoting to you? And I was like, when I said that, I'm like, yeah, the way they treat me, am I going to be confiding my emotions? And my family was the same. Like it just hard to have the space to deal emotionally. So I
For sure.
pushed through and then made my actually physical health a lot worse. And now, as 30 years on, I started having, issues, and I've had to slow down. And now the emotional and trauma and stuff has kind of
And
hit
they
me the
come in
last few years.
takes all forms and all timelines, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And so I've been superficially, and they've even I remember I had to look up my old medical records, and the doctor, when I was released from the rehab, said, she's adjusted well. And I look at it now and go, just, because how was I adjusting well? I didn't adjust at all. I just kind of was in coping mode. It's so,
That's part of
you know,
adjusting though too. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, yeah. Well,
and
I'm
the
glad you found.
separating, it's so easy when you have a lot of practical things and a lot of to get lined up because of how inaccessible the world is. Like I had a whole new, map to learn of where I could go and couldn't. And you just like to actually, the whole acceptance piece is, yeah, I guess I'm saying
Where are
it's
you
a
calling
moving.
in from?
Oh, Ottawa in Canada.
Yeah, because you called it physio. That kind of identified you as outside of this country, right? I like it, right? All right. Well, thanks for weighing in. And how long have you been coming to MBS, did you say?
A few years. I actually came there physically once a number of years ago when I was in Minneapolis for a
Yeah,
class, but the online classes the last few years, which has been a godsend since I'm laid up with a pressure injury now. So it's a great opportunity.
yeah, yeah. All right, Melinda, you're up.
Okay. Hi. Um,
First, I just want to say thank you to everyone for sharing. It's been a really amazing discussion. I'm a bit of a word nerd and a yoga nerd. So when the topic came up, and I keep thinking about it, and healing's a hard word, but at least in English, the word to heal literally means to make whole. And
Oh,
it
wow.
doesn't mean to fix.
Mm-hmm.
It means to make whole. And I think that's different. And it really strikes me because in my personal belief, the practice of yoga is the practice of feeling whole. Like if you go back to you take your seat, find ease in the body, still the mind, so you realize that you are whole as you are now. Um, and then it becomes like a cycle because it's a practice, because then the more you do that, the more you practice feeling whole, or even feeling, as Christine was just saying, like if you've dissociated something, practicing feeling, whether it's physical or emotional, can be painful and at first. But then the more you do it, the more comfortable you are in your body, and the easier it is to keep your seat, and then you're more connected to feeling whole. And you just, at least for me, you just want to do it over and over and over again and come back to it at the points where you're feeling most disconnected or most not whole, and need to experience that healing again.
So when you said that's when I feel the most whole, use that phrase or something very, what do you mean? What's the sensation?
Oh, I don't even know how to describe it.
I know. Not
Yeah.
neither do any of us. That's why we want to put some of the burden on each other.
Yeah.
So what would you, so I could also ask it of Liz, when all of a sudden she went from looking at her heart struggling to her heart as a dancer, and it went into her whole body. What is that sensation? And you're saying the practice of yoga is the practice of being whole as you are, which, say more about that.
Well, like one of the ways just to take a really practical example, one thing that's really common in MS is to lose a sensation in your feet.
Mm-hmm.
But there's all sorts of things we do in yoga, usually groundedness, that reconnect us to that.
Mm-hmm.
And then and it's a gift to yourself to say there is a way I can feel my entire body, even if I can't feel my entire body. I can be my whole self.
Be your whole self, or in a way that includes your body, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that is definitely part of it for sure. So we're gonna slide finally into the practice part of this a little bit more for the remaining time, and it's like to so one of the things when you center at the beginning of a class or the beginning of a practice, in a way, when the mind starts to be able to submerge into the midline. Whoops, is he using words like that again? Like so like, or when you might say when the mind calms down, or when the mind isn't out there being so active, then there's a sensation that I'm just being where I am, right? So something about an active mind and not being where I am, and it's really hard for someone to live a trauma loss disability to actually just be where they are. I mean, I'm gonna keep thinking about Laura from a little kid, just not ever quite trusting or able to trust like where she was, right? And as you and I know, it takes years and years and years. I'm still learning how to be where I am in the space I'm in, right? So when you start trying to practice the sensation of feeling whole, right? And you start landing, right? It helps to give some things for your mind to do, right? Because at the core, at some point, I think when you're just meditating, you're going to the under the home that precedes even anything that you are and becoming part of that. But in asana, you're trying to become a vehicle, right? And when I say the mind needs to submerge into the midline, that's just a technique, right? So feel your feet on the floor, your sitting bones. And it turns out when I really want my mind to have to pay attention to something else rather than all the things that it's struggling with, like right now, my pinky finger and ring finger on my right hand are falling asleep because my elbow is bent and it's blah, 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 blah. There's things going on right now, right? But when I want my mind not to pay attention to all the happenings, it helps for me to try to access the space that's in between. So what's the space between my sitting bones? When I soften the jaw, the inside of my mouth, something changes. When I soften my eyes, but I know I'm doing this not for shavasana, I'm doing this for action, right? I'm trying to make sure that the quiet part of me, let's just throw a fancy word in there and say the accessing the parasympathetic part of your nervous system is actually going to be part of outward action. So I can't feel my feet on the foot pedals. Can I allow that there must be input of my feet on the foot pedals? Can I know that my feet aren't falling through the floor? Because otherwise I wouldn't be able to stay in the chair. That there are things happening that are helping me stay upright. And so I'm going to make space for that. And I'm going to be able to make space for the fact of what's already happening by doing things to make my mind come more into my midline. So as we're centering a little bit in the body that you actually are living in right now, I'm trying to take time to give that process that comes from a quieting energy. If I had just told you to sit up straight and tall and broaden across your collarbones, that would have been fine. Except we're trying to get our awareness to enter the midline, the space between the sitting bones. So now when I go to broaden across my collarbones and lift my chest, my mind having to pay more attention and submerging into the midline can activate the action across my collarbones. And of course, I like to say broaden between the shoulder blades, broaden across the sacrum. So my mind's grasp of the container that is my torso is getting more signposts. My torso was always my torso. My mind just didn't have a way to get connected to it. Asana allows your mind to create enough structure to let in what was already happening. That starts to be a really good time to breathe and to include your breathing into a sense of structured container. If you go on the couch and you go in your bed, it's harder to feel structure as one of the vehicles. When you're laying flat in bed, it's harder, for example, to find your midline. You can quiet your mind, but right now we're trying to bring alertness through the spine, through the limbs. And as you get more connected and do all the things you know how to activate your spine, legs, and torso, can you do that and feel the whole room? Be vibrant from inside to out and stay connected or open to the connection to the whole room. It's amazing how much we don't trust our own presence. We don't utilize our own presence. So you've been learning with asana, you've been learning all sense of technique, all sorts of techniques that allow you to accentuate and heighten a sense of wholeness. Good. And then release. So, of course, one of the ways that I activate my whole life force is learning how to have there be a whole structure and lift my sternum. So as you know, I think a lift of your chest is a transformative action of connection. If you've gone to my classes, you know, I really think that, right? But let's show you how the mind can screw everything up. If I get all caught up in am I lifting my chest well? And by the way, lifting your chest takes years and years to do well, right? It's not something you know how to do. Just so you know, it's a long time, right? I'm still learning shit about it, right? And so I can do all these things to make sure my feet are connected, my sits bones are connected to the whole room. I'm being my container, trying to make sure I'm not blocking anything, right? But I do know there are techniques that can vitalize my sense of wholeness. And then I can keep adding my breath to an already existing part sense of wholeness that comes from body to mind, right? Or I could do it the other way. But like, what if I told you to be even more dynamic? I want you to put your fingers on your collarbone, on your collarbones down, thumb and index finger, and your hand on your solar plexus. And I want you to seriously learn to lift the space between the shoulders, between your hands. Like get it doing a Kegel right here. Right? And I could build that into a whole class. And I could do all sorts of things trying to tell you that this is a super dynamic action. And then all of a sudden, are you feeling whole anymore? Release that for a second, right? It's like when you get too caught up on the how, you actually stop being whole. When you don't do anything to give yourself structure and do some discipline, you just become a big pile of mush, right? So now I want you to like be more aware of rocking back and forth, right? Change gravity, keep your sternum lifted, keep your broadening between your collarbones, but also now keep the quietness in your mouth, soften the skin on your face, let your ear holes connect. What the hell's going on now? Like, as I'm giving you those instructions, do you think my mind is rushing to do all those things? Like I'm running around trying to get ready for a party? No, I've practiced enough where I know how I start doing things more connectedly. So my mind doesn't have to do them all. That I just start knowing how to feel whole in any action, right? that's how yoga poses start to right themselves, right? So then I'm just switching gravity again. I'm just like watching and moving, right? But I'm watching how any action reverberates. It's kind of like no matter where you move, you've flicked your finger into a still pool and it's going everywhere. You're learning all these techniques that allow you to watch the ripples of everything, right? Or I could just go back to the world where I just move like I have to do most of the day, where I don't pay attention to everything. Actually, you've been learning things. This is why Melinda said just by practicing yoga, you're practicing feeling more whole, right? But are you willing? So I'm thinking about Amanda, about I'm going to beat it. I'm going to correct the defect, right? Think about that lens. Wait, I'm going to show them. And suddenly you've let other into the picture, right? I'm just using, we all do this. I'm going to show that's how I broke my femur bone, right? I'm going to, doing yoga, like I'm going to show them, damn it. Like all of a sudden, other has entered my pose. I'm going to, I don't need to heal. I'm really surprised in this conversation, but I get it, how healing's a triggering word, right? It's like that, for a lot of you kind of said that, or it's the wrong-headed word, right? But do you know how to move energy from inside to out, right? So let's sit up straight and tall for a second. Has anyone figured out that it's really cool to get your spine in traction? That it feels really good, right? Like that's just one of those things. So I'm lifting up here and I'm letting gravity lengthen my spine. I can tell you, does anyone not, do you know your real stuck points on your spine, like which vertebrae they are? Oh, I do. So now when I lean forward, right, I'm going to let the one of the things that guides my sense of holistic, holism, right? I'm gonna like find my sitting bones, gonna create structure. I'm gonna quickly open to the space between the sitting bones that I can never see and I can never quite grasp and I can never fully understand. And that's okay because my mind doesn't have to know anything and there's nothing for me to fix. There's no defect for me to correct, right? There isn't anything going on here except, wow, if I start moving in two directions through my spine, if I hit through my sits bones, lift my chest and extend out to the top of my head, broaden across my shoulder blades, right? And all of a sudden, there's a whole other thing happening here. Does anyone feel energy going through all your limbs right now a little bit? Because you lengthen your spine. Can you feel that? It's freaking great. You know a lot of techniques about how to foster your mind finally figuring out your whole, right? That it's actually, and I don't know about you, but how isn't that healing? I'm not, it's like the I find that there are two levels of constriction on my sense of transformation, to use Bill's word there. One is that I'm supposed to accept everything. No, actually, I should not accept. Nobody showed me enough that length in my vertebrae and my spine frickin' felt good through my entire body. No one actually showed me to listen to that. They didn't cue my brain to it. They didn't do anything, right? Like, and my God, everyone's spine should get lengthened, right? And so I'm not going to accept the world as it's said to me, but I do need to listen to what I'm listening. So I've got a constant rotation in my spine I got pretty bad scoliosis, right? And so when I lengthen my back here, and I can then lengthen and derotate, which is one of the keys to working with scoliosis, right? Extension and derotation. And then I actually listen to how I feel more of me engaged. And then I breathe into what it is to feel more engaged through my whole body. How come I don't have this all day long? Because I'm stupid and it's not practical. And then release. So my point is, I don't know. So I'm going to go back to what Melinda said, because which I like that she's a word nerd. She's a word nerd, right? That you do yoga because you're practicing wholeness in yoga. So what happens when I use my hands as a reflection of my midline? Another technique, right? What happens when I allow, these are things I teach all the time in my Monday classes, when I let the connection between the heel of my hands actually show me, see, now I can even do this, and it starts to make me smile, like was energy between my legs, the inner thigh, not inner thighs, the down by my knees, inside edge of my thighs actually is like moving like this. Like, so now I'm working on doing this action and having my knees come together and apart in a similar thing, but I'm doing it from my very core of my lower abdomen. So I'm getting a sense of movement between a movement here. Now I'm starting to add my spine to it, right? Man, I should have this be a class, right? It'd be like, call it butterfly class, right? Where you start to like can use the ways you know how to feel your whole body, take one action, move your spine back and forth, move your legs back and forth together, even though I'm paralyzed, and get a syncing of all those movements at once. You know how to practice stuff. You do. You've been coming to classes long enough. Then I'm going to come more fully into midline. And I'm going to smile that I just like flew like a butterfly just there for a second. I just heard Muhammad Ali in my head. I float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. But I don't want to sting like a bee. And if I'm whole and I practice my own sense of wholeness, I won't have to sting like a bee. I won't have to confront the parts of the world that aren't as responsive. If I can figure out and use yoga to help me always come back to what's actually here, not what I'm anticipating. I don't know. I don't think this is healing just for people with disability. I think getting better at finding this place for any human being on the planet, it's healing. Good. And then release. I part of why I don't want human beings to be triggered by the word healing is that I think that we have a couple of things that are, and this is like a line right out of my book right now, but human beings are wired for survival. We're wired for it. Your body will keep you going. If your mind can finally just settle down a little bit, there's a lot you can realize about the wonder of the universe, right? Right. So and we're wired for survival and we have a tremendous capacity to heal. I think our survival is going to depend on both. I don't think you convince anyone that what just happened in the United States is a huge mistake. I think if you ask them to start healing, you got a chance. Right? We don't allow that healing's going to have many faces. I think we're in trouble. So you could call it transformation. Bill, I mean, I like it, but I think that there's a tremendous, I mean, what I heard in everyone in the themes is that what you're calling healing moments or transformational moments or reframing moments were also healing moments of where you let the river be the river again instead of thinking it has to go a certain way. Call that radical acceptance. I don't know. There are all the words. I think there's a lot of wisdom in today's call. But you practice the whole feeling and use what you've learned. It's not that hard. I need to practice it. I'm going through a hard time too right now. So it's like I need to practice what I actually know. Right? So, all right, everybody. It's time to wrap up another year of finding different ways to unpack, share, and transform the experience of trauma, loss, and disability. Right? And so when I was first having spasticity when I was young and paralyzed, and for a couple of years, I used to try to stop it. It was embarrassing, but it was also threw me off balance. You know, my legs would spasm out straight. And then for a while, sometimes I'd try to wheel underneath my spasming legs and get before I had to put my foot on the pedals. But a lot of times I would look at the spasm, and then I figured out that if you can kind of punch the muscle that's spasming, you know, a little bit, then it'll drop. The spasm will break. Like it's the, you know, so like my relationship to spasticity strikes me that that I'm sorry to make commentary like this at the end. I think like this country and the country I live in just punched its own spasming leg and tried to stop the spasm. And oh my God, does it need to heal? The relationship to the spasticity needs to change. You don't just try to hit it, right? Or blame the leg or do whatever you do, right? There's a whole bunch of ways to do this. All right, everybody. I know I've done good if Gail puts a heart, a love heart on her screen. So I'm going to take that as that we did good. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Thanks, Matthew.